Hey everyone, Kevin P. McAuliffe here for Lowepost.com, and I'm back again with the next lesson in our Fairlight Essentials tutorial series. And in this lesson, I wanted to make sure that I added working with EQ into our fundamentals course. I always find this to be a very tricky subject for a lot of people getting started when working with audio. So in this lesson, we're going to focus on getting in and adjusting your audio to make it sound better than it was when it was shot. And then I want to get in and show you how you can manipulate audio to give it that very cool telephone sound effect that I showed you a few lessons back. All right, and as you can see, we are in the Fairlight panel inside of DaVinci Resolve. And before we get rolling, I do want to just mention something that's very important when working through this lesson. I'm going to be making some pretty dynamic gain changes while working inside of the EQ window. Now, the purpose of me doing this is to give you a very visual representation as well as letting you be able to hear exactly what is going on as I make these adjustments. Because one thing that drives me crazy is watching lessons where they make minor adjustments and you can't actually hear what's been done. Keep in mind, when you're making adjustments inside of the EQ window, it might only be very minor, 1 dB, 2 dB, dropping it down 2 or 3 dB. So keep that in mind while you're working. What I'm going to do when we get to the end of this lesson is I'm going to wrap everything up and just show you a very, very minor change that you can make inside the EQ that will make a huge and powerful difference to your final end product. Let's get rolling. You'll see that I have 5 clips here that we're going to be working with. The first one is a bounce that I created of an original voiceover track that we had earlier in this piece.
The highlight of my week for the last decade was having lunch every Sunday at Burger Man.
All right, now I don't need to play the entire way through, and the reason that I bounced that clip or that voiceover piece is because we'd cut it up into multiple pieces, and strictly for ease of use in this lesson, I wanted to have it as one clip. Now I'm going to talk about how we could take EQ in that situation where we had multiple edits to a clip and copy and paste it to the other parts of it in just a little bit. What I have also done here is I've gotten in and I've created 4 pieces of tone. One piece of tone at 100 hertz, 440 hertz, 1 kilohertz, and of course 2 kilohertz. And what I want to do here is I want to start with our 100 hertz tone. Now, once I've selected it, I'm going to navigate to the inspector, of course, because I have the clip selected. I see all of the clip-based parameters that are associated with this clip. And we're going to come down to our clip equalizer. Now you might be thinking, well, Kev, what exactly does this clip equalizer do? Well, what it gives you the ability to do is to pick very specific bands in the range of your audio or your sound and get in and equalize it, or for that matter, unequalize it to either create a perfectly even sounding piece of audio, or to get in and alter the way the audio sounds in a completely different way to give you a very different sound, much like that of talking on a telephone. Now, what we're going to do when we're talking about the tone for right now is I'm just going to turn off bands 2 and 3. And I just want to focus on bands 1 and 4 for the purposes of these 4 clips. Now let's talk a little bit about what's going on. Now you'll see that we have the entire range or spectrum of audio here, basically from 0 hertz all the way up to 16,000 hertz. Now right now band 1 is right here and band 4 is right here. And you'll notice that based on these little symbols here, the actual arc of the audio is doing something at the start and at the end. What these 2 symbols represent are filters. The first one here represents a high-pass filter. What this filter does is basically let through all of the high or the treble in a sound and filters out all of the bass. Now on the flip side, this down here at the end is a low-pass filter. Of course, filters out all the treble, only lets through the bass. Now I can, for the purposes of the first clip, actually turn band 4 off because you'll hear that sound is pretty low. So we're going to talk about the high-pass filter. What it's designed to do, again, only let through the treble of a clip. Now you'll hear, if I drag this right back like such and I hit play, everything sounds the way that it should. But take a look at what's going to happen once I start filtering out all of that low end. Now keep in mind, this piece of tone is at 100 hertz, which is about here on our clip EQ. So what's going to happen is that as our arc gets to that 100 mark, it's slowly going to bring the audio down to nothing. And you'll actually be able to watch it on the VU meter right over here as I play it. I'm going to come back to the beginning here. And there it goes, filtering out all the way down to nothing. You'll see right now, that's set to minus 20. Now it's still there. I say nothing, but it's all the way down at minus 20. So we've basically gotten in and taken 20 decibels out of that clip. All right? Now let's flip this around a little bit here, and I'm just going to bring this back. I'm just going to reset the clip equalizer. We're going to select the second clip. Now keep in mind, this clip is at 440 hertz. So therefore, if we utilize the same technique, I'm just going to turn these bands off here. If I drag our high-pass filter all the way down, I shouldn't start filtering out that sound until I get to about here. Let's see if I'm right. And there it goes. Okay, now just because of the nature of Fairlight, as I drag, occasionally you can hear the audio click back through, but you'll see now if I come back and I hit play, that's filtered out. We took 20 decibels out of that sound. Now let me show you how this works on the flip side by basically getting in utilizing that low pass filter, because you'll hear now this sound is pretty high. Okay, so what we want to do is filter out the high, only keep the low. We're going to select this clip and we're going to do this in reverse. I'm going to turn everything off except our low pass filter. Now I know that this piece of tone is at about 1K right here. So again, as soon as my arc hits that 1K, it's going to start to filter it out and it's going to be gone. Let's do this here. And there's 20 dB taken out of the audio. You'll see if I come back here, boom. And last but certainly not least, if I was to take this clip EQ and apply it here, this clip is 2K. So basically, once I got to about, let's just say to about there, it would be filtered out altogether. Now, let's talk about that little technique that I said before about taking our EQ and copying and pasting it from clip to clip. What I'm going to do is right click, I'm going to copy this clip, and I'm going to paste its attributes, but only the equalizer attribute to this clip here and say apply. Now you'll see that low pass filter has been applied and my audio should, once we hit 2K, be dipped down to absolutely nothing. Now again, I say nothing, it's had 20 dB cut off, which to be honest is quite a lot. Now let's talk about what's going on with these other bands here. I'm going to come back to our actual voiceover clip now, because let's get started by getting in and doing a little bit of EQ with this clip. And normally what I like to do with my high pass and low pass is set that first. I like to set the range that I'm going to be working with so I know exactly what to do with bands 2 and 3. So what I'm going to do is come back, I'm going to turn all of the bands on here for the clip equalizer, and let's hit play. And I'm just going to adjust 1, and then I will adjust 4 for the high pass and the low pass.
The highlight of my week for the last decade was having lunch every Sunday at Burger Max, home of the world's greatest hamburger. The most recent bestseller is my date. Sometimes I stay for hours.
All right, so we've gotten in and made our first adjustment. So by doing this, what I now know is that for bands 2 and 3, where I really want to be getting in and altering is somewhere in between bands 1 and 4. Now here's where things get really interesting. I'm going to come back here and let's talk about these two bands, bands 2 and 3. And you're going to notice that they have a couple different symbols that we're working with. Now right now we're sitting at 500 hertz for band 2. As I take it and start to drag, you'll notice that the frequency changes, obviously based on where we're sitting inside of the EQ. Now you'll also notice that as I start to drag band 2 up, it's giving it a very different shape, one that you might not expect, but it's directly related on the shape preset that we set down here. Now in most cases, depending on what you want to do, in my case I'm just sweetening the audio a little bit, I normally like to select this band here, which will let me just pull the sound up a little bit in here, and you'll see this is by decibels. So based on the frequency I've selected, we're going to raise certain parts of the voiceover up in that dynamic range so it's a little bit louder and give it a little bit more presence. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to come back here and I'm going to hit play.
The highlight of my week for the last decade was having lunch every Sunday at Burger Max, home
You
of
can
the
hear it right
world's
away.
greatest hamburger. The most recent bestseller is my date. Sometimes I stay for hours.
So you can see that with band 2, as soon as I grab that and start making adjustments immediately, it's noticeable because I found the sweet spot inside of the EQ for his voice. Now, what you might want to do when getting in and trying to figure out where that sweet spot is do a little bit of sweeping. What does that mean? I'm going to come back and hit play. I'm just going to take band 2, bring it right back down again.
The highlight of my week
This
for
is
the last
sweeping.
decade was having lunch every Sunday at Burger Max, home of the world's greatest hamburger. The most recent bestseller is my date. Sometimes I stay for hours.
Sweeping is moving that band back and forth until you find the exact area that you're happy with that you can get in and adjust. Now let's take our third band here.
The highlight of my week for the last decade was having lunch every Sunday at Burger Max, home of the world's greatest hamburger. The most recent bestseller is my date. Sometimes I stay for hours.
Okay, now you can see what our EQ looks like now. Now let's come back and listen to the before and after. I'm going to hit play.
The highlight of my week for the last decade was having lunch every Sunday at Burger Max, home
You
of
can
the
hear.
world's greatest hamburger. The most recent bestseller is my date. Sometimes I stay for hours.
It's very, very different than it was before. Now the question is, what is the perfect EQ? Well, to be honest, it's really up to you. It's really what you want your audio to sound like. Now, one thing that I do want to do is I want to focus on a couple of these other parameters in here, like gain and like Q. Let's just come back to our clip. We're going to make sure that we have it selected so that when we come to our clip equalizer here, I'm just going to turn it back on. You'll see that the gain represents how high up we are pulling this marker to make a volume adjustment. Now, Q is a good one. What Q represents is your bandwidth. What Q gives you the ability to do is to make that a very fine point or to make it a very wide and sweeping area. So obviously, the more wide and sweeping it is, the more range of the vocals, or the sound effect for that matter, that you will be getting in and adjusting by manipulating the EQ. So keep that in mind. Now, what's also important to keep in mind is that depending on the shape of the actual EQ band you choose, you'll see you may not actually have the option of Q, because this one is designed specifically just to give you a point. You'll see there we go again, no Q value here either. But like I said, for me, when I'm doing a basic EQ, I normally like to select this band setup right here, and it normally gives me a pretty good end result. Now, again, if I was happy with this, all I would have to do is to simply take it, I'm going to copy it. I could come back to all of these clips here, right-click, say Paste Attributes, paste the equalizer in and say Apply, and you'll now see that that EQ has been applied to multiple clips.
The highlight of my week for the last decade was having lunch every Sunday at Burger Max, home of the world's greatest hamburger. The most recent bestseller is my date. Sometimes I stay for hours.
Now, we took this and we were talking about sweetening up the audio. Let's take this one step further and let's ruin the audio. What I'm going to do is I'm going to reset this EQ, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to deal with this EQ from band 1 and band 4. What we're going to do is we're going to cut out all of the bass, we're going to cut out all of the treble, and only deal with the mid-ranges. Now, what I'm also going to do here is just turn on band 3. We're just going to raise band 3 up just a little bit here. Get that as wide as we can get it. Now, I might need to make some minor adjustments, but now take a listen to what we have.
The highlight of my week for the last decade was having lunch every Sunday at Burger Max, home of the world's greatest hamburger. The most recent bestseller is my date. Sometimes I stay for hours.
And you could see literally with a few clicks of the mouse inside of the clip equalizer, we can now make this audio sound like it's being spoken through a telephone. Now you might be thinking, Kev, well, which band is better to use, 2 or 3? I'll be honest with you, it really doesn't matter. If I was to choose band 2 and set band 2 up the way we had band 3 set up here, we can now come back.
The highlight of my week for the last decade was having lunch every Sunday at Burger Max.
Because what's important to keep in mind is that whether we're using band 2 or band 3, they're really sitting at the same frequency, so the end result is going to be exactly the same. Now let's take this concept one step further. We've been talking about dealing with things on a clip level. Now we know that when working in Fairlight, we can work on a clip level or we can work on a track level. So let's now do this on a track level. What I'm going to do is let's just reset this. I should probably just reset the EQ on all of the clips here. So we'll just reset them all. We'll turn them all off. Perfect. And let's now close the inspector. Let's come to our mixer. Let's deal with our voiceover track, and let's now come up to the EQ, because one thing you'll notice immediately in the EQ here is that instead of having a 4-band EQ, we actually have a 6-band EQ. But keep in mind, what we're doing now, we're doing to the entire track, not just on a clip-by-clip basis. So what we do here will obviously impact everything as opposed to just those specific voiceover clips. So this is where you have to start thinking, do I want to adjust just specific clips or everything in one shot? Now what we're going to do is I'm going to turn on band 1. We're going to turn on band 6 here. I'm going to turn, let's just turn bands 2 off. We'll turn 4 and 5 off as well. Bring this right in. And again, much like we've done before, it's a little bit of trial and error here, but we'll probably be pretty good. This is looking okay. Let's just adjust our Q factor. Very nice. Now what's important to keep in mind is you'll notice our range hasn't changed. We're still going from 0 hertz up to about 16K. We just get a little bit of a better look at the equalizer and more bands. Let's now come back and hit play.
Highlight of my week for the last decade was having lunch every Sunday at Burger Max, home of the world's greatest hamburger.
And you hear it sounds just like it did when we had it applied on the clip level. Now let's take this one step further. Let's say I wanted to now start creating a library of different equalizer presets. So let's do this. What we're going to do is I'm going to close the equalizer for the voiceover. You can actually see there's the band represented in the mixer. Let's now head up to the Fairlight dropdown to our presets library. What I want to do is to create a new equalizer preset. I'm going to tell Fairlight what channel the equalizer is currently on. It's currently on the voiceover track. What I'm now going to do is tell it to save a new equalizer preset. I'm going to call this telephone. I'm going to say OK, and we're simply going to close the equalizer presets. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to remove this EQ. I'm just going to double click. We'll just reset it here back to nothing. Let's close. Everything's back to being normal. All right. Now what I've decided is, you know what? I really in this situation need to use that telephone EQ on track number 1. No problem. I don't need to recreate it. All I need to do is to navigate up to the Fairlight dropdown, come down to our presets library. I'm going to select that telephone preset and assign it to voiceover track 1 and say apply. And as soon as I do, you'll see it applied there. We can now come back.
Every Sunday at Burger Max, home of the world's greatest hamburger. The most recent bestseller is my date. Sometimes I stay for hours.
Now, here's the most important thing to keep in mind while you're doing this. You will notice that by getting in and adjusting the EQ, what you're actually doing in this situation is taking this band of audio and cranking it way up to plus 20. This is something that you obviously have to take into consideration when you are working. Okay, you'll notice here that if I bring track 3 down a little bit, maybe we just want to bring it up about 3 dB. I'll bring it to right there. Come back.
The highlight of my week for the last decade was having lunch every Sunday at Burger Max.
Okay, so obviously based on how much you want to bring that volume up is going to determine how much you actually raise that level up. Because keep in mind, it's really the high pass and the low pass that's getting in and accomplishing what we wanted to accomplish. It's not so much the volume. But in this case, because I find that volume level to be quite low, that's why I'm getting in and cranking things up a little bit, whether it's, plus 3, plus 5, all the way up to plus 20, so you can get in and have the flexibility of getting the audio as even or as cool sounding as you want by simply getting in and manipulating that EQ either on the clip or on your track. All right, now as I always do, I want to remind you that if you have any questions or comments about this or any other course that Lowepost offers, we encourage you to head on over to our forums at lowepost.com/forums and let us know. This has been Kevin P. McAuliffe. Thanks a lot.